General quarters. All hands man your battle stations.
Welcome to WETSU, a Battleship New Jersey podcast. I'm your host, Marshal Spevak, and it's my privilege to serve as CEO and Executive Director of the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're joined by a special friend of the Battleship, Joe Benton. Joe is the General Manager and Vice President of McAllister Towing in Philadelphia. He piloted the Battleship New Jersey on 4 separate movements on our trip to the dry dock. Joe and his tugboats, like the Robert E. McAllister, Suzanne McAllister, Beverly R. McAllister, and many more, flawlessly moved the battleship from Camden to Paulsboro, Paulsboro to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Paulsboro, and finally from Paulsboro back home to our home port in Camden City waterfront. But Joe is more than just a pilot. He helped the battleship and our team navigate the dangerous waters of dry docking planning. And as a trustee of the Battleship New Jersey's Board of Trustees and as chair of the Battleship's Maintenance Committee, he was an integral part of the project team. Joe also proudly serves our country as a commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve. He's a Strategic Sealift Officer and has the U.S. Navy Craftmaster badge. He's also the Assistant Officer in charge of the SSO Harbor Pilots. Joe is a graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, and I just learned he also has his FAA airplane pilot license. So he's got to take me up. Joe, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Let's start at the beginning. You ended up going to the Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point. How did you end up at Kings Point? What brought you there when you were growing up? Did you know that this was something that you wanted to be doing?
Growing up as a kid, I knew I wanted to be an airplane pilot and possibly fly for the Navy. So I was, applied to Annapolis and all the colleges with Navy ROTC. And I was at a college fair one night at Camden Catholic High School where I attended in Cherry Hill. And my dad said to me, it's like, why don't you check out the Merchant Marine Academy? The heck's that? So I went and talked to him and, it turned out to be a really, really good fit for me.
How does a service academy like Kings Point differ from the Naval Academy?
Well, the unique thing about Kings Point is you can go active duty in any branch of the armed forces when you come out. Or, like in my case, I just took a Navy Reserve commission. A lot of flexibility.
And did you end up on any Merchant Mariner vessels after Kings Point?
During Kings Point, part of our curriculum is you spend a year at sea putting into practice what you learn in the classroom. So I spent about 390 days on commercial merchant ships, from container ships going to Puerto Rico to coastwise chemical tankers. And then I immediately after graduation, 4 days after I graduated, I got on a chemical tanker in Texas and worked on that for about 4 months.
You previously captained one of the tugboats that brought the Battleship New Jersey up the river when she returned home in 2001, and culminating to 2024, where you not only captained and piloted the battleship itself, but were in control of all tugboats. What was it like in 2001, and then fast forward to 2024, and tell us a little bit about that experience and that planning.
In 2001, I was captain on the harbor tug Teresa McAllister. I'd been so for probably about 4 months at the time. And I remember the night before the move, we got a call from our dispatcher saying to go to Pier 1 Broadway in Camden around 7 o'clock in the morning, but they wouldn't give me any other details. Very suspicious. And I said, are we moving something big and gray? And like, I can't tell you about it. So I immediately called my dad and said, hey, guess what? We're moving the battleship. Oh, crap. So he came down like 5 o'clock in the morning, got on the boat, brought donuts for everybody. And we got underway and met the ship and got her off the dock. And we got some great pictures because my boat was what we call the tailboat. We had a line up in the transom of the ship to help steer it. And I got a lot of great pictures of my dad basically shooting over my shoulder of me driving with the Words New Jersey, all filling up the wheelhouse windows on the tugboat. So it's pretty cool. And I remember we got the ship alongside and, it just took forever to tie up because most dead ships do. And we were picking up one of the docking pilots, Phil O'Neill, and he was a very athletic individual. And they didn't have a pilot ladder over the side. So I said, okay, Bill, he needs to go midship and put a ladder up. He's like, no, just swing alongside on the forecastle. Like I did that. And he jumped off the forecastle onto the wheelhouse of the tugboat. I could hear him flying through the air. And then boom, right on the top of the wheelhouse. And he came down. I, gave him a hard time. I said, Bill, if that didn't go right, you would have had a VHF antenna, not in a good place. So we had a good laugh about that. But it was pretty neat, And I remember as the sun came up, both banks of the river were filled with people.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty neat. Never seen that before. And that was such a short move. And then some 20 years later, we're taking the ship to the dry dock. And, I go from being the tug captain on the first move to being the pilot in charge of the whole thing. So it's an incredible experience. I still kind of get chills about it, And, I remember it being extremely windy and cold the day that we moved in March. But it was a beautiful, clear sky. And, in all our planning meetings, we had, we were talking, we got the soundings and all the stuff, and we took the mast off so she fit under the bridge. And, and everybody I talked to that wasn't associated with the ship was like, oh, she's been sitting in the mud for 20 years. She's not going to move. And like the math looked right. We played the tides right. But there was always that little doubt in the back of my mind, helicopters flying overhead. You had the governor and admirals and all this stuff. I'm like, great, this would be a career ender for me if this didn't go well. But I remember we had trouble getting the forward breast lines aboard, so we had to pinch the bow of the ship in to help get them free. And I remember when we did that, the stern came off the dock, and that was what I was most worried about because that was in the mud. She came right off. I'm like, all right, we're good. Got the lines in and got her off the dock and drove her like we stole
her. Let's take a step back for a moment. And you're a member of the Battleship's Board of Trustees, chair of the maintenance committee, as I said before. How did you end up on the Battleship's board? What's it been like prior to dry docking? What was, a lot of your experience on board the trustees?
Sure. I forget exactly what year I joined the board. It kind of blends together now, but I know, I've been trying to get on the board and get involved in the ship ever since, that day in 2001 when I helped move it. And it was like, a lot of management changes and things like that. And I think I finally, through my father, got connected with, the world famous Pat Jones, who I think got my toe in the door.
And mine too.
And I remember, once I think it might have been like the first or second board meeting, everybody's going on making the reports and everything. And I put my hand up. I'm like, not for nothing, but this is a ship. And you can't tell me that, we don't have water leaking in somewhere and all this stuff like that. And I remember Pat telling me, she's like, how about I make you in charge of the maintenance committee so you can find your own answers? Like, okay, good enough. So
that sounds like Pat.
Yeah, it's been a interesting ride, with all the different things that have changes for the good for the ship over the years. And, it's just more or less a vacant berth. We pulled the ship alongside everything we have going here. It's been neat. A lot of neat people and a lot of neat projects.
We talked about dry docking here for years before it actually happened, before it was even funded. Summer 2023 budget, the state FY24 budget appropriation act passes. It includes $5 million for the battleship for dry docking. Do you remember what your reaction was when you first heard we were getting funded, dry docking was going to happen? Was it normally you hear good news and it's a weight off your shoulders, but this is probably weight on your shoulders.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking a lot of emotions like, holy crap, we got the money. And then I'm thinking, crap, we got to move the ship. She's been here for 20 years. It's not, you can't just pull one plug and take the lines in and go. So I know it's a lot of planning.
So talk about the planning process. Like, I came on board as CEO in the end of November. Planning really wasn't happening in the way we probably should have been at that time, but we were moving the ball forward. On your end of things, I think you certainly took on more than just a random person would have done as the harbor pilot of the ship. What was the planning process like for you, and what were some of the things that you enjoyed about it?
Right, well, obviously, it was a very compressed time schedule by the time we finally pulled the trigger and then got you on board and actually made things start to happen. And I remember, I've been working on tugboats and for the past 20 years and then managing my company since 2008. So I've been involved with a lot of dry dock planning for our tugboats, but obviously this is on a much larger scale. But the general concepts are the same, So we just got together, got a plan of different things we had to, take care of to get the ship underway. And I know my biggest concern is, you look at this ship and she's massive, and you're looking at the top of the mast. I'm like, trying to eyeball that with the bridge.
Yeah.
I'm like, we need a number for that because I don't think that's going to. And it turns out that the ship was 175 feet tall for her air draft, and the clearance under the wall limit was only 150. So I'm like, okay, I wasn't a greatest student in math, but I know those numbers, it's not going to work. So we engaged, Hudson Engineering to get that planning and made plans to remove the mast. So that, we couldn't do that, then there's no sense even trying to move the ship because it wouldn't work. So
Yeah.
once we conquered that hurdle, then just working with all the different contractors to try to set up services, but a lot of meetings with the shipyard because draft was an issue.
Yeah.
And, the way she sits here is fine for, lining up with the brows and everything. But when you put a ship on dry dock, you have to have it close to even keel as possible. And I think we had about a 10-foot difference between the bow and the stern. So we had to figure out how to get the bow down and put ballast in tanks that hadn't had water in them since, I don't know, probably the 80s.
We normally try to keep the water outside of the ship.
Exactly.
In this instance, we put the water inside of the ship, but it all worked out, thankfully. So let's talk for a second about how we ended up. March 20th, 2024 was the date that we left here in Camden. What exactly had to happen in terms of the tides, the currents, the weather in order to make that a go?
Sure. Well, the biggest concern here is because of the shoaling was the tides. We had to sail exactly at the top of the high tide.
12:10 p.m.
Thank you. All right. I don't know why I have brain fog. I don't know if it's PTS with blocking out certain things. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so we had to play the tide exactly. So we had the boats and everybody here several hours early because you can't really make up time.
Yeah.
You can always kill time. And it's the fact that the ship hadn't moved in 20 years. And it's been a while since the lines were adjusted, let alone removed from the bollards on the ship. So and had to pad the time with that. And we had to get the brows off ahead of time and get everybody on by high reach, which took a while. And had that there. And then all the line handling crews standing by and made up the tugs. And, we kind of got it down. Once we got things rolling and started getting the lines moved, we got down to about one or two spring lines just to hold us there. And then when the time was right, we popped those off and away we went. So the tide was a concern, and the wind. If it was say 20 knots of wind or above, we
were getting close at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we were right on the edge, but the Coast Guard has requirements and restrictions for approving their tow plans. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't planning on trying to get underway if it sustained 30 knots of wind. That's like that's a no-go. So the speed was okay, but the direction was a little bit of a challenge because it was square on the beam holding us to the dock.
Right.
So we really had to use a lot of tug power to get her off and get the bow up into the wind. And then once we got clear of the dock, it was fine. There was plenty of water once we got her about 100 feet off the dock.
So we push off the pier for the first time in almost 25 years. We're moving. Probably right before we start to execute the 180-degree turn. What was it you actually what was it that it actually sort of hit you like, holy shit, this is happening?
Yeah.
What was that moment for you?
That was moving in Battleship. It was pretty awesome. I remember seeing you up there on the flying bridge and give each other a big hug, and it's like, holy crap, some of the people said we're not going to be able to do, and got the funding and put everything together in a very short amount of time.
Very short amount of time.
And then we're out there, and
I remember when I think I was probably the last person to be to get on board on the high reach after the ceremony ended. And I'm wearing my suit and tie, and I had my bag inside the wardroom, and I go inside to change as quickly as I can and come back out, and we're off the dock and we're moving. And that was like an oh my god moment to me. Like, oh, we're finally doing this. This is finally happening. I think that's when I ran up to the flybridge to talk to you, and especially on the turn when the ship turned 180 degrees to head south downriver. It was hard to appreciate that in the moment being on board, but then going back and watching the drones, the news, helicopter footage. I mean, it was a sight to see. And for the almost 3,000 people who were on the dock watching us depart, and the thousands who probably saw us on both banks of the river in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, it was certainly a sight to see. So we originally talked about that this could be like a 6 to 10 hour trip downriver. We ended up doing it in like 3. What was the calculation that we thought maybe it might be that long versus what actually happened in reality?
I think a lot of it is I like to pad things just in case for if there's it took a little bit more effort to get her underway, and if we had because they weren't shutting down the river for us.
Right.
They were they had a safety zone around to keep small boats, but they weren't so commercial traffic was still coming and going.
Yeah.
And I knew we had to sail at a certain time to make the tide. But if they were bringing in, say, a 900-foot container ship into Packer Avenue Marine Terminal,
Right.
we were going to have to wait somewhere, in the upper river above the bridge till the ship got out of the way. Because
we had to do that from Paulsboro to Philadelphia.
That's right. Yeah, we had to pull over and let some traffic by. We had a little bit more room down there, but the day that we sailed in March, so I just wanted to make sure because that's a big choke point in the river underneath the Walt Whitman Bridge between Gloucester Terminal and Packer. Because when the big ships turn around there, it blocks the channel. Nobody's getting by except for in a small boat. So.
Yeah. It was in March 2024. We were getting underway. We had the big event, which you, of course, did not see probably any of.
Right.
That was going on in the pier, as you mentioned. Governor Murphy, Admiral Anderson came from Washington. Rear Admiral Tom Anderson, the XO of Team Ships, the shipbuilding command, as well as a bunch of other dignitaries from the state were here. Almost 3,000 people. News helicopters flying. I think I did like 10 different interviews that morning. We were everywhere in the news. It was an incredible time for the ship. But at the end of the day, the friends of mine joked around, well, what's going to happen? God forbid something happens. You're like the captain. You got to go down with the ship, right? I said, and I pulled one of your lines out, and I said, well, we even if we did take on water, we could throw a big party first, move everyone up to like the 03, 04 level, and we would have been above the water still. But just knowing that, the world was watching, and really it was the world, because it was more than just we see, how much the dry docking went over internationally. Did you feel that weight at all? Or was it like any other job? Initially
leading up to it. But once we got underway, I didn't, really have the time, thankfully, to have to worry about just, towing the ship and getting her from point A to point B. And I figured, the rest will be whatever. That's beyond my control.
Yeah.
My main priority was to look after the ship and everybody on board, the tugboats and everything. So it's just, it didn't matter to me if the president was there wanting to talk to me. I'm like, sorry, sir, I'm driving the ship. You can, you can wait.
Spoken like a true docking pilot. We went from Camden to Paulsboro, and then Paulsboro to Philadelphia. We had a little bit of an obstacle on the way to Philadelphia, and that was the USNS Gilliland that was parked right outside at the pier outside of dry dock number 3 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So we had to make a turn and then essentially back into the dry dock, which is unusual. Normally you would just go in bow first. We obviously did not do that. So talk about that maneuver and what was associated with getting the ship past the Gilliland, but then also hopping the sail into the dry dock and what that sort of took.
Sure. I mean, for us, at least McAllister and our company, that's something we've done routinely because, we brought a lot of commercial ships like the Gilliland into that same berth, and there was always something on the outside, so we had to go around it. But obviously, this was a little bit more of a high-profile asset here. But, the concepts were the same. We we sailed from Paulsboro with the flood current, so it took a little wiggling to get her over into the channel. And then getting underway, we had to slow down and let a container ship come by that was diverted from Baltimore after the issue there. And then, the flood current pushing us, and we had to turn 180 degrees to get the bow into the current, and then just kind of, sweep it back it right around the corner of at Pier 6 in McGillyland, and then just kind of get her set up and wiggle it in there. And they got the hauling in line on the ship, and then the dry dock kind of winched the ship in, worked her way in nice and easy. But she's pretty heavy, so it took a little bit of oomph to get her around the corner there.
I remember, I can't remember which tugboat it was. I think maybe it was the Robert McAllister. I remember I was standing on top of turret 3, and watching us go in stern first, and she was just pushing us like she had no room left, but she was tugging us in there.
Yeah.
And it was, and then watching all our friends at Philly Ship Repair and the line handlers landside, getting us tied up and moving the lines as we started to pull in. You worked a lot in the past with our friends at Philly Ship Repair, and Phil Giles, the docking master. What were some of the things that you had to work with them on and making sure that this ran smoothly?
Well, we had a lot of planning meetings ahead of time. Normally, for any other ship coming in, we'd have one meeting to discuss it. There was a lot of calls and texts and emails and conversation with Phil and I to make sure that we were all on the same page. And because the ship is relatively large and the visibility is restricted, from where I was in the flying bridge, we had 2 other pilots, one managing things up forward, and then one guy back aft, and he had the best view for setting it up for the dry dock. So once we got underway from Paulsboro and I turned the ship around, I handed it off to Phil Huff, and then he coordinated with the tugs to get her back in because he had a better view of everything. So it's routinely how we do it for the larger ships anyway, because of one guy can't be in 2 places at once, and each person has a different perspective. And with this ship, it's interesting because the bridge wings don't go anywhere near the sides of the ship like a normal commercial ship. So there's at least another 20 feet or so from the bridge wing to the side of the ship. So I can't.
You were moving
really
around.
See. Yeah, can't see. So I'm running up and down different decks and trying to get a good angle on everything. But Bill got her lined up and put her in there.
So then let's talk for a second about the dry docking itself. And what were your impressions about how our project went? We don't need to go into all the particulars of everything we did, all the 5 major projects we did, but you were there quite often at the dry dock. You got to see the work being done firsthand. What was your impression of how it all went, and your role in it?
Yeah, it went really smooth, I thought, because we're dealing with, professionals like Phil and the ship repair and Donna and everybody there. I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And they knew how special the project was. So they took extra care. It wasn't just some regular rust bucket ship that they had in there. They were taking care of this national treasure for us. And I mean, they, kept things on time and on target with budget and timeline and everything. And it was pretty impressive to see.
The battleship spent 78 days on the blocks. We're now looking to finalize the date to get out of the dry dock. Any difference between your planning process between the first 2 legs versus the last 2 legs?
So we spent 70-something days in the dry dock, so the weather got significantly better.
Yes, it did, thankfully.
So, I mean, the wind is always a factor, but especially that time of year. But, really, we just kind of did everything in reverse. But, wanted to make sure that we took extra good care of her because she was, fresh paint, everything from the water line down and all that. It's, significant effort just to get her to dry dock. So, we just, kind of took our time and had to, manage some vessel traffic on the way out. Because that's the same thing. They didn't shut the river down for us. So we didn't want to pull out in front of a big tanker or a container ship coming by. So we had to work around that. But it was relatively straightforward, and the temperature was much nicer.
Yes, it was. It was about 30 degrees and 30-mile-an-hour winds when we left, and about it was almost 100 degrees out that day, I think, and 0-mile-an-hour winds. It's almost the complete opposite. And then on this second, fourth and final leg, I should say, second leg of the trip home, we had Commander Steve Halley, the captain of what was then the PCU New Jersey, which is now the USS New Jersey, SSN 796, our newest sister ship, the submarine New Jersey, and some of the crew from the submarine on board. They spent a lot of time with you on the bridge. What was that experience?
That was pretty great. I mean, yeah, Commander Halley was an experienced ship handler, and I found it, fascinating and a lot of fun having him up there on the flying bridge, because he was, I was talking through the maneuvers with him, and he understood. He wasn't some spectator.
Yeah.
So just happened just a regular guy in dress whites up there, just, talking shop with him the whole time. It was pretty neat, and, we had a lot of media on board that day, especially too, and him and the rest of my team, my handlers were kind of keeping the press away so I could focus, and it was pretty neat. And without even thinking, he would just kind of like pick people and just kind of direct him to the other side of the ship, and then my team did that too. So
we also learned of a familiar connection with McAllister when the sub crew was on board.
That's right. Skipper Steve Halley, his wife Alyssa, is related to the McAllister family and our tugboat company. So it was pretty neat to have them aboard, and it's been kind of a close connection and friendship with myself and Steve and the rest of my team. So it's been pretty neat.
And McAllister tugs were the ones who handled the submarine leaving Earl, coming into Earl, was there on station with them all week during commissioning week at Naval Weapons Station Earl and Leonardo. We were there. You and I were there together on the Wednesday following commissioning when the boat pulled out of port and headed back to Norfolk. We also went to travel down to Norfolk together with a couple of our team here at the Battleship to visit on the submarine. You and I had lunch in the wardroom. We toured. We just hung out. I mean, we were there for like 5 hours, right? I mean, it was an awesome day. I mean, I know what it was like to me, but for you, what was it like? You're a commander in the Navy. I'm just a civilian. What was that experience? Spending some time on the boat.
It's pretty neat. I mean, I piloted various submarines throughout my civilian and Navy career. But usually it's just been, I get on board and I'm stuffed down a hatch and immediately up the sail and then piloting the boat. I've never actually had time to walk around. And on the other subs I've been on, they had people to make sure that I went the right way and didn't get lost and didn't see things that, weren't supposed to. But it was pretty neat. It was fascinating. But the fact that, how small it is, I'm 6'1", and I'm ducking my head everywhere I went. And the fact that two people couldn't pass each other in the passageway, it was a special type of person. I'm glad I was on board and got to experience that. But nothing I'd be interested in doing long term. Yeah, for sure.
The submarine life is certainly not the tall man's game. That's for sure. We commissioned the submarine New Jersey first time since February 1991. There's a new USS New Jersey in the active fleet. We spent a lot of time and really meaningful connections made with the boat to make sure that we were passing on the legacy of this great warship to the next great warship, or as Captain Halley calls the boat, the apex predator of the submarine fleet.
That's right.
What's it like to have a new USS New Jersey in the fleet?
Well, it's like we're carrying on the legacy of this great battleship. There were certain artifacts from this ship that were presented to them, so the New Jersey legacy lives on. I mean, the battleship's going to be here for quite a while after us spending the money for the dry docking life extension. So, but it's nice to have another albeit smaller version out there protected in a country rather. So it's it's pretty neat to see that legacy move forward.
So we mentioned you're a commander in the U.S. Navy Reserve. You talked about your Strategic Sealift Officer. What exactly does that mean? What is your job in the Navy? How did you become one? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I got my mission in the Navy Reserve as an ensign June of 2000 when I graduated at Kingston. And the Strategic Sealift Officer program used to be called the Merchant Marine Reserve. And basically, there's about 2,500 officers in the country that are reservists that are merchant mariners by trade. And in the event of a national emergency, if they need to crew up MARAD ships or military SEAL command ships, they would pull us onto active duty to do that. And my special subset is we have a group, there's about 25 of us right now. They're our harbor pilots. That's what we do for our day job. They're docking pilots or river pilots in different ports around the country. And then for our 2 weeks of active duty, we go and pilot, ships for the Navy in different ports. And I've been all around the world doing stuff like that. I'm a qualified harbor pilot and go to Spain, and I'm working on my qualification for Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and I've done a lot of stuff in and around the States. So it's pretty neat.
So tell us, you mentioned some of the places that you've been. Can you tell us about some of the cool experiences you've had, in your time in the Navy? Sure.
I mean, it's, traveling all around doing basically what I do for my day job, but handling Navy ships. And it's funny. I mean, I'll bring in 900-foot tankers or container ships are big and heavy, and the tugboats are high horsepower, and then I'll get on a destroyer that weighs nothing in comparison. But you have to be real careful because you push on them, break them, and bend them, and things like that. So it's pretty neat, but they handle awesome. You have a destroyer with like an obscene amount of horsepower. I forget what it is, in excess of 30 knots, things like that. But I had the unique opportunity to pilot a USS Washington submarine into Rhoda, Spain for the first time. That was the first submarine I've ever been on. And able to convert that to when USS Delaware came here, I'd already had experience, and
I was commissioned.
Yeah. So it was pretty neat. Got to do a lot of that, and did a lot of teaching up at the Navy Surface Warfare Officer School on the ship simulator, teaching junior officers and senior officers the art of ship handling. Junior officers as they're getting their qualifications before they go to their first ship, and then senior officers like commanders and captains that have been ashore for a while, and then before they go back to sea, they have the required refresher training. I've done that for a few years up there, so a lot of neat stuff.
So you mentioned earlier you were just doing some drawing and working on your qualifications for Pearl Harbor. So what exactly does that mean? What does that entail? Or what are the types of things that you need to do in order to become qualified to work in these certain ports or certain countries?
Sure. The interesting qualification, like for Rhoda, Spain, there's no federal regulatory agency that handles, pilotage and chart drawing. So that was actually, pretty easy to be qualified out there. I just demonstrated proficiency in all classes of ships and went out there a couple times, and the seal the base, waved the magic wand, and I got a nice little letter from my file. But in the commercial world, especially on the Delaware, any U.S. ports, you have to have round trips on ships day and night, 12 round ships qualified pilotage, and then you have to draw the nautical chart from memory. So that's kind of what I've been working on. So I've been out to Pearl Harbor a couple times to achieve the amount of trips I need. So I'm just studying my limited spare time to try to get that done, so I can qualify to help out there should they need me.
You've been involved with the Battleship, obviously, as we discussed, for one way or another for, nearly 20 years. You've seen our ups and our downs these last couple of years, especially, and we've certainly had both of them. The work that we did at Dry Dock, as we are saying, is going to keep us floating literally and figuratively for the next 30 years. We hope, at least. What do you see as the next 10, 15 years of the Battleship? What would you like to see us continue to do better, or do something new? You sort of come into this as a different perspective, being on the river every day, being in the Navy, but having a chance to work with ships and vessels of all different kinds. So what do you think the future, or what do you hope, at least for, in your perspective, the future for Battleship New Jersey is?
Over the years, we've been, updating all the spaces. We got the T-Deck project done. It looks magnificent. The guys in there grinding and doing stuff now for other parts of the ship, and the fantail structure to make it, have more vents on here. And I mean, your team there, I got to hand it to them. They're always coming up with new ideas, from the futsal tournament on the pier that I've been involved with, shagging soccer balls out of the river to, Harlem Globetrotters and things like that. The guys are always looking for new ways to attract people to the ship, and, trying to open up more and more spaces of the ship. I mean, it's out of the 4 Iowas, obviously. I'm a little partial, but this is obviously the best one out of all of them, where you can see pretty much everything. Just, updating the bridge, a little cleanup up there, but there's a lot of little things, nothing huge, I mean, she's in great shape. I mean, cool. The turrets move. That would be kind of neat too. So
It's on the list.
So kind of bringing her almost back to, life as when she was a live ship. I mean, we have a lot of active duty Navy folks over here for different, promotion ceremonies. I had my commander ceremony on board here in 2016, I think. So it's
hopefully soon we'll have your captain's promotion ceremony.
Fingers crossed. That would be great. But it's moving forward. I mean, the ship's in magnificent shape, and that's the biggest thing. And everything else is just kind of gravy. It's been having time and money to make these little improvements, making it that much better every time. And every time, I mean, I'm on the ship a lot, and it gets better every time. You got a great staff and great volunteers, and everybody's moving in the right direction under your leadership. So I mean, it's pretty impressive. I mean, just walking down the pier and seeing this massive thing, it's
just we, at the time of recording this, we just finished up painting the freeboard, 65,000 square feet of freeboard. So everything above the black wind water line. And we waited to do that until we got back to Camden, and did not do that at the dry dock because of the tugboats and the sides and marking up the sides. But well worth it. Now, I think you're absolutely right. I think you could ask anyone who works here or who served here. After we got back, we had a crew reunion. I think we're really probably in the best shape the ship has been since, not even when she was decommissioned, but probably since the early 80s, when she came out of the dry dock again, when she was recommissioned in 82. So that's really, I think, where we're at. But we, right before the commissioning of the submarine, we sat right here at this table in the captain's import cabin with Rear Admiral retired Ronald Tucker, who is the last commanding officer of the ship. And we ended up taking the name for this podcast off of his motto that he brought to the crew, WETSU. We eat this stuff up, or something slightly there, more vulgar. But the idea is that, this crew does really intense, hard work, and does it with a smile on their face. Any sort of WETSU moment stand out for you, either as a part of the dry docking or just in your career in the Navy?
Well, I mean, specifically with the WETSU flag, being able to break that out when we got underway, it was pretty awesome. And then being able to meet Admiral Tucker, the guy that came up with it, that was just like an incredible moment for me. As an American and a naval officer. I mean, and he's such a really neat guy. And I could have sat here all day long listening to the sea stories, and then being able to see him again in his uniform at the commissioning ceremony. Just such a classy guy. And his wife's a wonderful woman. It's just they're obviously great friends of the ship, and we stay in touch with them. So it's pretty amazing. And I know I geeked out when he was here. I ran down to the gift shop and bought a flag and got Admiral Tucker to sign it for me. So it's pretty awesome. That's probably displayed my man cave at home, my I love me wall.
Yeah.
So it's
I mean,
great.
it's one of the things I like to tell people who come visit us here at the Battleship is that one of the great things that I really love about working here is we can either find something new or we learn something new about the ship almost every day. And the WETSU battle flag, the last battle flag of the BB-62, just happened to be found in a black trash bag in one of the forward up chute compartments. And, we just assumed that somebody walked off with it in decom, but, here we are. It's found, things like that, things like the, nuclear PTF key and just other historical records that DoD declassifies year over year. We found out earlier, this year about some sailors who happen to win Purple Hearts for shrapnel, that they got hit with over the armor on the main deck, and just things like that. You just find something new every day and find something cool out every day and try to use that to further the goal here. And so for us, it's the launching of this podcast. It's selling some of the replica WETSU flags that if you're watching this on video, you can see right behind me. And continue to use the historical nature to further what we're doing here at the museum. So Joe, that's I think all I've got for us today. Anything you want to close with? Anything you want to make sure our listeners know from the dry docking period, or just generally from what you do every day out on the river? If people are seeing your tugboats down on the Delaware, or crossing over the bridge and seeing big container ships move, things like that, what is it that you think people might not know just from being a Joe bystander, going over the bridge or going down 295 or somewhere else where you might happen to see some ships being moved?
Sure. Tugboats are the workhorses of the harbor. 100-foot, 1,000-foot container ship that works its way up here, and people might see them as they're driving across the Walt Whitman Bridge to see this massive ship. But just to know that the skill of the tug crews and the folks involved to get that large ship turned around to the dock is no small feat. I mean, we do it day in and day out, day and night, and make it look easy. But just they may not know all the hard work that's involved in everybody to make that happen. And we're lucky enough to parlay those skills to move in this great battleship here. And we've got a great team in the office and shoreside and on all the boats. And none of this would have happened without the support of our families. And make sure I thank my family for all their love and support. And I was actually lucky enough to have my kids. I took them out of school. They got approval from the principal in March to come out on our launch to Point Comfort to see what Dad does every day. And they're I'm usually out piloting ships in the wee hours of the morning, and they're not as interested in getting out of bed to come out to see that, but to be able to spend the day out there and
watch a battleship,
wife and kids, and it's pretty cool. Got a lot of great pictures, a lot of awesome family memories, and then they were all there when we came back in June. My wife got stuck in the traffic of us having to close the Walt Whitman Bridge. made it on time. I apologize. Said, sorry, hon, that was me. It's
one of the few times you could say that. I'm
exactly,
sure.
Exactly.
Responsible for closing one of the nation's largest bridges.
Yeah, no, those guys on the bridge commission there were awesome. Made it easy. So it's a lot of love and support from family and everybody over the years. Thank you.
Commander Joe Benton, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.